or some color adjustments, and that is just the finishing touches to the whole project. In After Effects, we're gonna start by importing our sequence from Cinema 4D. So let's double click the import window. And this is the folder it went to. If I just click any one of these and then make sure that PNG sequence is ticked, I can click import and After Effects will automatically detect the entire sequence. If you haven't changed the setting, by default After Effects is going to interpret this sequence at 30 FPS. I can see mine is already at 24, but if it's not, go to Interpret Footage. So right click, Interpret, and Main. And in here we want to assume a frame rate of 24. And then let's drag this to a new composition button. We can preview the whole thing. So I've lowered the quality here to, let's say, half. Press the spacebar just to quickly preview the entire animation. We can see it loops seamlessly, which is exactly what we want. If I just bump up the quality to full and just check the first frame, it's identical to the last frame in our animation. So we are going to remove this first frame. So if I go back to 0, press page down, and then press B to set this as the new beginning for this composition. I can then right click and then trim comp to work area. So this is now our starting point. If we leave that extra frame in, it means that each time we play this loop back to back, it's actually a bit longer than it should be. So we want to make sure to take that out. Anyway, let's move on. In the comp, let's open up the color management settings. Let's go to project working space and just make sure that we are working in 16 bits per channel, which is the same color depth we rendered out of Cinema 4D. And my working space here is set to this sRGB profile, which is actually the same as the profile on my monitor. So I know that my colors here will stay consistent from Cinema 4D to what I am looking at right now. Anyway, for the actual compositing, I really didn't do too much in After Effects. I just had a couple of adjustment layers with some glow effects and then a bit of color grading. So starting with some glow, let's go to Effect, Stylize, and Glow. This is on a adjustment layer. Let's go to the threshold and put this all the way up to 100%. So this is the first layer of glow. It's really more prominent down here on the ocean surface. The highlights from the reflection of the sun, if we enable glow, they just end up popping a bit more. So we might not want to have this so strong up here. Let's just see the before and after. It's not too drastic, but what I might do is create a mask for the ocean surface. Just cutting the image in half like this. This is on our adjustment layer. Let's press F to bring up the feathering and then set this to, let's say, 250 or so to make the transition between where the effect will be applied and the sky to be, like a fade, basically. Okay, let's create another adjustment layer. And this time, still using glow, we are going to push the threshold quite high once again. But the radius this time is going to be much larger. So if I just grab this and just, let's say, to about 400%. And really that's all I did as far as applying a few post effects. Of course, your own scene is probably different, especially if you've used a different background image. I'm just showing you how I applied it to my scene. Anyway, the final thing here is some color adjustments, and I'm going to be using the Lumetri color effect. This is found under color correction and Lumetri color. And in here, I mostly want to warm up my image. So if I go to the basic correction, in the temperature, I'm going to set this up to about 40 or so. That's going to warm up all of the tones in my image. Below that, we have the tint, which if we go to the right, it's going to make it more purple. And then if you go to the left, it's going to be a bit more green. So I'm going to set this to about -10 or thereabouts. So just a quick before and after. That's the difference. One more section we can play with is the curves section, which if you scroll down is this right here. So if we open it up, and these hue and saturation curves in particular, I find quite useful. Let's say the hue versus hue slider. We can use this to change the tone of any color in the frame. So let's say we have a lot of yellow tones. If we put some handles either side of those tones on this graph here, we can select those colors only and make some adjustments. So maybe make the yellows a bit more orange by going in this direction. It's a subtle change, but there was a slight difference there. If I want to make it more obvious, let's use the reds as an example. So if I put another handle either side of red, I can take this red handle and then move it up and down, and you can see the difference. So if you find yourself not liking any particular tones in your image, you can target them using these curves and make the adjustments. So hue versus hue adjusts the colors. Hue versus saturation, which is above that, this is going to adjust the saturation of any color range you select. And below that we have hue versus luma, which controls the brightness of any tone range that you select. So it's a very powerful section of this lumetri color effect, and you can play around with it and see what kind of adjustments you can make. But for me, I'm just going to leave it there. The next step is just going to be exporting my animation out of After Effects. So if I go to Composition, Add to Render Queue, let's go to the Output module, and I'm going to use QuickTime. And in the format options, it's going to be the animation codec. So using that QuickTime and animation format here in the options, this is going to create a large file, which is going to still contain a lot of the color information, which is going to make it more useful when we want to make some edits to it in other apps like Premiere Pro. Anyway, we then just specify a save path, and for me it's going to be the tutorial folder, and then we just hit render. Anyway, that's it. And there we have it, just a few post effects applied on top of our image from Cinema 4D. In the next lesson, I will show you the final export settings in Premiere Pro.